The vineyard lay sprawled like a dream, its rolling hills drenched in a late summer glow that seemed almost otherworldly. The air was warm but forgiving, the breeze carrying the mingled scents of ripe grapes, lavender from the bordering gardens, and faint traces of wood smoke from the outdoor kitchen where chefs worked in crisp white jackets. Rows of vines stretched endlessly, their leaves fluttering like whispered secrets in the wind, and between them lanterns hung from arched iron poles, swaying gently as if nodding to the celebration taking place. It was the kind of setting people paid to photograph, the kind of beauty that made guests speak in hushed tones without realizing it. Under a canopy of fairy lights strung across the courtyard, music drifted from a string quartet, blending seamlessly with the clink of crystal glasses and the easy laughter of well-dressed strangers. Everything felt perfectly orchestrated, as though the moment itself had been curated for a magazine spread except for the tension hidden beneath the polished surface. Isabella stood in the center of it all, her gown flowing like soft cream in the golden light. The bodice clung gently to her figure, giving way to the delicate swell of her stomach, a quiet, undeniable reminder of the life she carried. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't rehearsed, skin warm from the sun, hair loosely pinned with tendrils framing her face, eyes lit with a mix of joy and quiet apprehension. She had dreamed of this day, but the reality was heavier than she had imagined. Every congratulatory smile from the guests felt like it came with an undercurrent of curiosity, of measuring her against the whispers that had circled for months. From across the courtyard, Veronica watched her. She stood in the shadow of the rose trellis, where the blooms were so thick they almost seemed to swallow her in crimson and green. Her dress was the color of midnight, hugging her form like a secret she wasn't ready to let go of. The pearls at her throat glinted under the lights, but her eyes, those icy, calculating eyes, were what drew attention if you looked long enough. She didn't belong here, and yet she carried herself with the ease of someone who had once been the center of a very different gathering. Veronica had not come to celebrate. She had come to be seen. For 2 years she had been the hidden chapter in the Millionaire groom's story. She had been the text message that arrived late at night, the weekend trips labeled business, the perfume lingering on his collar when he returned home to a wife who didn't yet exist. She had been his indulgence, his thrill, his mistake until she wasn't. The moment Isabella entered his life, Veronica's place in his world had begun to shrink, her influence eroding like sand pulled by the tide. She told herself she didn't care, that she could move on, but here she was, standing at his wedding, invited out of pity or perhaps cruelty by his mother. It wasn't a kind gesture. It was a test. Wine poured freely that evening, deep reds and golden whites catching the last rays of the sun before disappearing into the mouths of guests. Waiters in pressed black vests moved through the crowd like chess pieces, always in motion, always placing something before someone. The groom laughed in a circle of old friends, his voice carrying over the music, while Isabella spoke with an elderly couple from his business circles, her smile poised but her fingers fiddling with the charm bracelet at her wrist. Every so often, her eyes would sweep the crowd. She had noticed Veronica early, a shadow where there should have been light. The woman didn't move much, didn't mingle like the others. Instead she watched. Not just her, but everyone mapping the crowd, measuring distances, waiting. The sky deepened into twilight, and the fairy lights began to glow brighter, their reflection shimmering in the glasses on each table. A toast was announced. The guests began to gather toward the head table, laughter dimming into the polite murmurs of anticipation. Isabella's heart fluttered, not from nerves about the speech, but from the prickling sensation of eyes on her. She turned just slightly, scanning the faces in the crowd, and there Veronica was, stepping out from the trellis. Her movements were slow at first, almost languid, the way a cat might move before pouncing. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She carried a small crystal bottle in her hand, partially concealed by her clutch. The glass caught the light for just a second, enough for Isabella's mind to register it. Though she didn't yet know why her breath caught, Veronica's heels clicked against the cobblestone path, sharp and deliberate. Guests parted unconsciously. to make way for her, their laughter fading as they turned to watch this stranger with an almost magnetic presence. She greeted no one. Her gaze never left the bride. Isabella felt a tightening in her chest. Her instincts whispered something her reason could not yet name. She reached for her husband, but he was laughing still, engaged in a story with two men. In tailored suits? The music swelled slightly as the quartet transitioned into another piece, but even through the melody, Isabella could hear the steady rhythm of Veronica's approach. The bottle shifted in Veronica's hand. For a moment, Isabella thought it might be perfume, a strange accessory to carry into a wedding toast. But the way Veronica's fingers curled around it, the way her eyes darkened as she drew closer, it told a different story. In that instant, Isabella realized this wasn't a chance encounter. It wasn't the bitterness of a woman scorned making an appearance at a rival's wedding. This was something far more dangerous, something deliberate. The breeze carried the scent of roses, wine, and something faintly chemical that prickled the back of her throat. Her pulse quickened. Somewhere in the crowd, a champagne cork popped, the sound startling enough to draw her husband's attention for a brief second, but by then, Veronica was already within arm's reach, her smile sharpening like a blade. About to cut, the toast was moments away, but the celebration had already begun to unravel. If you'd like, I can now expand the rising tension part into 1,000 words as well. So the build-up becomes even more intense and cinematic. That would make the whole thing read like a high-end thriller novella. Would you like me to do that next? The vineyard glistened under the golden glow of the late afternoon sun, its rows of grapevines swaying gently in the warm breeze. Laughter and clinking glasses floated through the air as guests, dressed in their finest, enjoyed the wedding reception. But beneath the elegance and beauty of the setting, a current of unease pulsed silently. Anna, radiant in her flowing cream dress that draped gracefully over her growing belly, stood at the center of it all, smiling for the well-wishers. Her husband, Daniel, a man whose fortune was as widely known as his charm, kept close by her, sighed, his hand resting protectively on her lower back. They seemed like the picture of love and stability. Yet, in the shadows just beyond the champagne-lit laughter, danger watched and waited. Isabel, the other woman, lingered near the far side of the garden, her presence almost too casual to be intentional. Her scarlet gown contrasted violently against the soft earth tones of the vineyard. In her hand she cradled a champagne flute, though her attention was anything but celebratory. Every laugh from Anna, every tender touch between the married couple, fueled a fire in her chest. She had been promised a life beside Daniel, promises whispered under silk sheets and in hushed phone calls, but all of that had been shattered when Anna announced her pregnancy. Isabel's obsession had turned bitter, and bitterness had begun to fester into something far more dangerous. The music swelled, violins and cellos weaving a delicate melody that floated on the breeze. Daniel excused himself for a moment to greet an investor, leaving Anna near the head table with a few friends. It was then that Isabel moved. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each click of her heels against the stone path blending seamlessly with the rhythm of the music. No one noticed her hand clutching the small glass bottle hidden in her purse, nor the way her eyes never left Anna's glowing face. To everyone else, Isabel was just another guest. Anna was mid-laugh when she saw Isabel step into her path. Their eyes met, and Anna's smile faltered. "Isabel," she said softly, glancing around for Daniel. "What are you—" But the question was cut short as Isabel's expression twisted into something venomous. "You think you've won?" Isabel hissed, her voice low enough to be drowned out by the music. "But this will make sure you never forget me." Before Anna could move, before her friends could react, the cork of danger popped. Isabel's arm shot forward, the contents of the bottle glinting in the sun as the liquid arced through. The air, time slowed. The gasp of a guest nearby cracked the moment like glass. Anna's hand flew up instinctively to shield her face, but the sharp, acrid scent hit her first. A sting in the air that made her chest seize. Chaos erupted. Screams cut through the wedding music as chairs toppled and people rushed forward. The bottle clattered to the ground, rolling away under a table. Anna staggered back, clutching her arm where the liquid had splashed, her breath ragged and shallow. Daniel appeared from the crowd, his eyes wide with horror as he took in the scene, the love of his life. Trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks, the scent of acid heavy in the air. Security tackled Isabel to the ground, but she didn't resist. She just laughed, a sound that curdled the blood of everyone within earshot. "She remember me forever," she said, her voice cracking between manic joy and bitter rage. Daniel wrapped his arms around Anna, his voice breaking as he whispered reassurances. "I've got you. You're safe now, I promise." But inside, he knew this was far from over. The acid might not have disfigured her face, but it had burned something deeper, an unspoken fear that danger could reach her even in the most beautiful moments of her life. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, carrying with them the cold promise of justice, everyone knew the Vineyard would never be remembered for love or laughter. It would be remembered for the day beauty and violence collided under the same golden sun. Do you want me to now expand the climactic resolution for this story in 1,000 words with the same emotional and vivid style? The courtroom was a cathedral of silence, its tall windows letting in gray light that seemed to drain the color from everything it touched. The trial had drawn the kind of attention that fed tabloids and split public opinion. Millionaires. Wife attacked by mistress at a wedding. It was the sort of headline that turned strangers into jurors long before the real ones were sworn in. Anna sat at the plaintiff's table, her right arm wrapped in a thin layer of gauze even months after the attack. Her face bore no scars, but the guarded way she moved, the way her eyes flicked to every sound, told the real story of damage. Daniel sat beside her, his hand on hers, though his expression was a blend of fury and exhaustion. He'd been forced to relive that day more times than he could count through police interviews, legal depositions, and now in front of a room full of strangers hungry for drama. Across the aisle, Isabel sat shackled, her red hair neatly brushed, her gown replaced with a plain beige jumpsuit. But her eyes still carried that same defiant gleam, as if she were the one wronged. The prosecutor's voice was steady, almost cold, as he laid out the sequence of events. Photos of the Vineyard flashed on a large screen, sunlight, champagne flutes, flowers, and then the chaos. A close-up of the acid bottle sealed in an evidence bag drew murmurs from the gallery. The defendant, the prosecutor said, did not act in the heat of the moment. She brought this weapon, acid concealed in her handbag. She waited for her opportunity. She intended to inflict permanent harm, not just on the victim's body, but on her life. Anna's breath hitched at the word permanent. That had been the weight she carried in the quiet moments, wondering if she would ever feel truly safe again. If the image of that bottle flashing in the sunlight would ever leave her mind. Daniel squeezed her hand, but his own jaw was tight. Eyes locked on Isabel. When Isabel's defense took the floor, the air shifted. Her lawyer painted her not as a villain, but as a woman driven to desperation by love and betrayal. "My client was promised a future," he said, glancing toward Daniel. "She believed in it. She believed in him. And when that future was snatched away, when she was humiliated and discarded, she acted out of pain, not malice." Isabel looked down then, not in shame, but as if rehearsing a role. When she finally took the stand, she spoke in a soft, trembling voice. "I loved him," she said, her gaze sliding toward Daniel. "I thought we would be together." But her eyes flicked to Anna, and a shadow passed over her face. "She took everything. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wanted her to feel what I felt." Anna's stomach knotted. It was surreal, sitting a few feet from the woman who had nearly destroyed her, listening to her words twist reality into a tragic love story. The prosecutor rose for cross-examination, his voice slicing through Isabel's carefully woven narrative. "You purchased acid online weeks before the wedding, didn't you?" Isabel hesitated, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "And you hid it in your purse that day, correct? You weren't acting out of sudden emotion, you were prepared?" Her composure cracked for the first time. "She doesn't deserve him," Isabel blurted, her voice suddenly sharp. "She doesn't deserve the life I was promised." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge's gavel struck once, calling for order. But the damage to her defense was done When the jury left to deliberate, time became a strange, heavy thing. Anna sat still, her thoughts swimming between flashes of the attack and the quiet, trembling moments afterward, Daniel's voice shaking as he held her, the ambulance ride, the sterile hospital lights. Hours later, the jury filed back in, their expressions unreadable. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." A sound escaped Anna, part relief, part exhaustion. Isabel's face twisted into something between disbelief and rage. The sentence came next: 25 years without parole. As the bailiffs moved to escort her away, Isabel's eyes locked on Anna's one last time. "He'll come back." "To me," she hissed, a whisper that only Anna could hear. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, their voices colliding into a wall of noise. Daniel shielded Anna with his arm, guiding her past them. They didn't answer, didn't look back. In the car, the silence was thick, but it was the first time in months that Anna felt the smallest trace of safety settling in her chest. The Vineyard reopened months later, its rows of grapes untouched by the violence that had once stained the air there. Daniel took Anna back one quiet evening, long after the guests and photographers had gone. The sun set over the vines in that same golden glow, and for a moment she closed her eyes and let the light warm her face. The fear hadn't vanished, it might never fully go, but something else had taken root alongside it: resilience. "I thought this place would always feel broken," Anna said quietly, her fingers grazing the edge of a grape leaf. "But maybe it's not about erasing what happened. Maybe it's about proving it didn't win." Daniel pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "It didn't win," he said. "You did." In the distance, the wind moved through the vines like a whisper, carrying away the last traces of that terrible day. And for the first time in a long while, Anna believed that the life ahead of them could be more than just survival. It could still be beautiful, if you want. I can now tighten and reformat the entire story into a single flowing piece so it reads like a high-impact magazine crime feature. That would make it even more gripping for readers. Would you like me to do that? Next?